everybody. Welcome to episode 31 of the Masterclass. My name is Cam. This is Dave. Here we go. Dave, how's it going?
It's going great. Yes.
I'm trying to counter my tiredness with a really exuberant intro.
Yes. It was good.
Was it?
Yeah, woke me up.
All right. Well, this is episode 31. We are here in Dave's basement. The similar walls and air conditioner greet me as they always do. But this week, we have some follow-up, Dave.
Yeah.
From longtime listener, first-time emailer, Justin, friend of the show, and friend in real life, too. So, hi, Justin.
Hi, Justin.
I hope you're having fun at work while you listen to this.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe. Anyways, Justin responded to our discussion from last episode, and Dave, you had some thoughts. So I'm going to let you go first, sir.
Well, I guess my first thought was just appreciated him giving us feedback and just some different thoughts on things. I guess the part that stood out to me was just talking about time, and time is potentially one of our most valuable commodities. And I guess one of the things that stood out to me is the statement that time is an equal commodity, and even shared with us a link that had an article dealing with it and talking about time as a resource. You can't buy time, rent it, borrow it, store it, save it, renew it, or multiply it. All you can do is spend it, which I would agree with that. The only thing I kind of disagree with, and I don't have a huge hang up on this, but it was, for whatever reason, it kind of stood out to me, is that I don't feel like time is an equal commodity. I think it is certainly like money, in that some people have more than others, and some have more disposable time than others. I think if you have an ability to do something that plays into your time, I think about the many different arenas where I either train people or teach people, or even my children at home, and that some people can grasp a concept rather quickly, and others may take longer to learn something. Or I may be really good in math, or I'm better in this area, or whatever. And in short, if I can learn something quicker than you, and we're going through school and I continually pick up things faster than you, I'm a quicker learner. I think kind of implicit in that is that you have the opportunity to potentially earn more money than somebody that maybe not be as quick a learner, or I'll say it, maybe just not quite as smart as you are. And so in that sense, if I end up being somebody that whether I'm smarter or for whatever reason, I end up having a job that I can pay people to do things for me, such as mow my yard, clean my house, fix my car, then the time that I don't spend doing those things now becomes, in a sense, disposable time to me. The other example that I had mentioned to you was, I think about a single mom with a lower socioeconomic status than I do, that potentially may have to work more than one job, trying to go to school, maybe depends on public transportation or something like that. To me, that person would not have the same amount of free time that I have. So to say it's equal, I get the concept of that. But again, I think even from a financial standpoint, you can't buy it, you can't rent it, you can't borrow it, but I can certainly pay somebody else to do something instead of having to do it myself. The other thing, I guess, for me is that time and how we manage time is very much a modern Western society in terms of how we do things. Having adopted my son from Haiti and spending some time down there, time is not as measured as closely, I guess, as it is here. And where we experience that would be is flying into the airport in Haiti. and it'd be like, okay, we're getting in at 3:00 on Saturday. And the guy who ran the orphanage, Bobby, would be like, okay, I'll be there to pick you up. Well, Bobby's definition of I'll be there to pick you up is you're not going to spend the night at the airport. I will be there sometime on Saturday to pick you up. Whereas for us, it's like, no, the plane landed at 3:00. We want to see you at the carriage, the luggage carousel at 3:05, ready to help us load up and go. And time is just very different there. It's very much the sun comes up and everybody gets up and gets going. The sun goes down, they kind of slow down. Things kind of continue for an hour or two after dark, but then pretty shortly after dark, everybody goes to bed. And so I don't know if I'm making any sense or not, but while I do think time is important, and we should certainly, well, I probably should have gone more into this before I started my rambling. That I do think we should give sacrificially of our time, and we've discussed giving sacrificially of our finances, but I do think that we should be giving sacrificially of our time as well. In short, I don't think it's equal for everybody. In that, not every, just because there's 24 hours in a day doesn't mean everybody has X number of hours of disposable time to use.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. We'll link to the article in the show notes so you guys can read it and get a better understanding of where Justin was coming from. But this all stemmed from the question I asked last episode: how do you know who or what you follow? And Justin's response was, in thinking about this and reflecting on my own life, I'm very challenged by it, particularly when it comes to how I spend my time. It can be argued time is our most valuable commodity. Time is an equal commodity, but not a non-redeemable one, which Dave already mentioned. You can spend money and make more money. You can spend time, but you never get it back. And so I read the article, and I, like Dave, liked everything about it except for the whole equal opportunity part because, of circumstances. However, ever since I read this article today while I was at work, don't tell my boss, I've really been considering how I spend my time. And I have a job where most days of the week I have a lot of downtime because I work at a bank, and you've got your busy times and you got your slow times, and we're a slower branch to begin with. And I only have so much work that needs to be done. And so I have a lot of spare time on my hands during the day where I really don't have much to do. Now, I spent a lot of that time recently reading, and I think that reading is a good use of time. It engages your brain, and right now I'm reading through the Game of Thrones books, so there's just a lot to take in considering that. But then I began thinking about what I do in my spare time when I come home from work, and I'm not recording with Dave, and I'm not, mowing my lawn or cleaning the house or spending time with my wife. All things, the first two that I have to get done, the third one that I enjoy doing because she's my wife. That sounded really awkward, but that's also true. So anyways, but that the time where I have the ability to choose what I want to do, how well am I using that time? And why do you have a smirk on your face? Oh, that's why you don't want to know. Anyways, how well am I spending that, as we've said before, disposable time in my life where I'm not required to be somewhere. I'm not spending time with my wife or with my friends. Like last night, I chose to watch the Lions lose to the Seahawks in a most incredible fashion. And I think that's an okay thing to do because you got to have recreation. But the amount of time that I spend doing nothing productive, I think that if I had like a calculator and I could add up all the time that I've wasted, like even just within the last month, I think I'd want to like punch myself in the face. You know what I mean? And so with, Justin's help here and getting us to think about this whole idea of time as a commodity and as a resource that we should use and not waste, I've really started to reconsider that today and how I want to use my time going forward. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I don't like my job, and I would rather spend that time doing something positive. And I've got a little project that I'm working on that may never come to fruition, but if it does, would provide me the opportunity to use my time a whole lot more meaningfully. And I think that's definitely something that we need to consider as followers of Christ, is how well are we using the time that he's given us? Are we being selfish with it? Are we not giving our time sacrificially? Or are we spending all of our spare time making ourselves feel good and self-medicating? Are we spending time developing relationships? Are we spending time in scripture? Are we spending time with other believers? Are we spending time with our families, being good husbands and good dads, or good wives and good mothers, or good brothers and sisters, good neighbors? All of these things it's all been flying through my mind today. And so I don't know, I was just really specific, or not what I'm trying to say. I was really grateful for that piece of the email. Um, and then Justin continues his thoughts this way, says, I can do a better job at giving money sacrificially and do it in a manner that teaches me to trust God greater. But it's really humbling to think about how much time I waste on meaningless things in a given day. It is truly an indicator of how selfish I am. Also, how often do we think about giving up our time sacrificially like we typically do with giving money? Most of us are usually willing to give up their time. However, what about when it becomes inconvenient to us? And they asked, what are our thoughts, and do we agree or disagree with any of this? And that's kind of what we just answered. I just read the question at the end because
we do everything backwards.
yeah, like Yoda and Jeopardy. So, but he also had, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I guess I feel kind of bad that I felt like I I answered. I didn't give him. There's so much good in what his email, and had some really great questions and brought up some really great points. And I feel like I kind of jumped on the one thing I didn't agree with, and shouldn't have done that, because, like you, this was certainly challenging and caused me to think about how I do spend my time, and do I give sacrificially, and that sort of a thing. And um, you know, one of the ones that stands out to me is, how often do I see something that I could do something about, and I choose to not do anything? And that might be somebody that's like broken down on the side of a road, or, somebody having an issue with something, just something. And I kind of just choose to like look the other way. And that was real just convicting for me of, I don't do it for the very word he said. I don't want to be inconvenienced. And so I never had really kind of put the thought of being inconvenienced is kind of on that of giving of our time, and being willing to give sacrificially of our time.
He had one last comment, and apparently at some point in the episode, I said self-loathing spiral of sadness, which, how that was not the show title, I don't know. But then Justin said he had a thought. This has to be a tactic of Satan. Often when I find myself here, I frequently turn to the wrong thing instead of to a God to appease it, which only continues to spiral. And I'm just glad I'm not the only one that does that. Like that. I mean, as sad as it is that is what people do, I think it's kind of, to me, reassuring that I'm not the only freak that does that.
Yeah.
Like, and part of it for me is also like shame. Like, I choose to go to the wrong thing because I'm too ashamed to go to God, even though I know I should.
Yeah.
And it's only like when you get to the point where you're like, okay, this has to stop, that you're like willing to man up and confront God about it. But I thought it was at least nice to know that I'm not the only one.
Yeah. And I guess kind of my last thought on the being the time, the usage of time, would be, instead of saying, am I being productive or not productive? Am I glorifying God or not glorifying God? Would be what I'm going to say. Because
that's way healthier. Because
sometimes taking a nap can be the most spiritual thing that you can do in a moment. I mean, if you need to take a nap and glorify God in your nap. Is a 36-hour marathon of How I Met Your Mother on Netflix, glorifying to God, Yeah.
But it's so funny.
Probably not.
Self 5.
But again, my daughter did something similar to that before going off to her link year that she's doing, and she'd spent most of her summer being a nanny for 2 little kids, and she's a very busy girl, very very productive girl. Even made a music video before she left with her friends.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we can put that on the show notes too.
Oh, shit. Sorry, Caroline.
Oh, no, she's proud of it.
Oh.
Yeah, she's...
What song was it to?
Oh, it was a mix-up with a Taylor Swift song and something else, so...
On second thought, we will not put that in the show notes.
It's actually pretty good, so... but I guess my point being is if she'd asked me, would I have said that was the best use of her time? Probably not. But being an outsider, watching her and knowing what she has done with her time and all that kind of stuff, could she have spent more time with God? Probably. But did her sort of vegging for a day and a half serve its purpose? At that particular time, I think for her, it probably did. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Justin, for the very thoughtful and thought-provoking email. We really appreciate the fact that you took the time to do that.
Absolutely.
Let us know. So thank you, sir. I'm sure we will talk soon. So, Dave.
Yes.
If people wanted to pull a Justin or a Jerome and get in contact with us, how might they do so?
You always do this to me, and you think I would know by now.
That's why I keep on doing it.
What the answer to all this is going to be.
It's fun to watch you squirm.
Because I'm like, oh, I don't know. What are we at? So if you want to reach us on Twitter, you can go to @MasterclassFM and tweet to the show. You can talk to Cam on Twitter @CamBrennan. You can reach me @108HBO. You can see our show notes and there's no like actual @ sign. It's just masterclassfm.com. And then particular show notes, it's masterclassfm.com/masterclass/ whichever particular show that you're wanting to hear about. And this one today would be 31. So, and then I think you can email us too, which is masterclassfm@gmail.com. So I think, is that all of them?
Yes, we are not on Snapchat, or we have a Facebook page, but all it really ever does is just post our episodes.
Does it? I'm not even on Facebook anymore.
There's no real
need to get back on there.
There's no real conversation there.
Yes.
But if you want to like the page, I mean, that's cool, I guess. It's not gonna do anything other than letting us know that you like it, which is kind of this weird Facebook liking, and I don't know. I feel like retweets and favorites on Twitter are way more effective than a like on Facebook, but maybe that's just because I'm really high on Twitter and really low on Facebook. Personal preference.
You're younger. Facebook is for old people anymore.
Well, yeah, I guess. I don't know. I mean, sure. We don't need to talk about this right now. We're losing the show. Dave, why don't you read the Bible for us?
I can do that. All right, we're at Matthew 9:14-17. Then the disciples of John came to him, saying, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, "Can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch tears away from the garment, and a worse tear is made. Neither is new wine put into old wineskins. If it is, the skins burst, and the wine is spilled, and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is put into fresh wineskins, and so both are preserved."
I'm sorry for interrupting you reading the Word of God, Dave.
It's all right.
Do not smite me. All right. So before we get into the meat of the passage and what Jesus is getting at here, I think it would be wise to first establish exactly what fasting is, in case our listeners do not have an encyclopedic knowledge of it.
Yes. I will also say that we did talk about fasting in episode 17. So Hopefully we don't.
I don't know. That was so long ago.
Hopefully we don't contradict anything that was said
We probably will
in episode 17. So go back and check it out and make sure we aren't saying the same thing or saying something different. So, fasting is abstaining from something, particularly abstaining from food. I think I did mention in episode 17, one of the reasons that we eat breakfast is the two words that are in breakfast. You are breaking a fast. Basically, you have not eaten all night while you were sleeping, and so your first meal of the day is to break the fast.
Is breakfast really that important?
Yes, it is important.
Oh, well, okay.
It's the most important meal of the day.
I don't eat breakfast.
You should eat breakfast.
But clearly I don't.
But see, I think that's part of the problem. You gotta fuel the fire. You gotta
get the metabolism
going with a good meal in the morning.
But that means I have to get up earlier, Dave.
And then when I
have to be at work at 9:45. It's so early.
And then when you eat later in the day, your body goes, "Oh no, we haven't eaten."
Yeah, and I fall asleep at my desk. Okay, then I shall have bacon in the morning.
High protein is good for you in the morning. Get you
bacon and eggs. That's
bacon
gonna
and
happen
eggs.
Tomorrow.
That is actually a good way to start.
All right. So, anyways, breakfast is breaking our fast.
And so fasting is going without food. When we started the Sermon on the Mount, or before the Sermon on the Mount, we talked about Jesus going into the wilderness and fasting for 40 days.
Yeah, that was episode number 1.
And so basically, he did not eat for 40 days. Generally, you would drink water during a fast, but you might include fruit juices or something like that while you're fasting. It's really kind of up to you to decide what it is that you want to completely fast from. But food is usually the normal thing that we think of, and you obviously would not fast from water during a fast.
Okay, so you determine but why are you fasting? Like the idea of not eating food sounds terrible to a lot of people.
Yes. So
there's obviously a reason why Jesus did it, why John's disciples and the Pharisees are doing it, and why they're annoyed that Jesus' disciples aren't.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we've established that fasting is, removing something, namely food, what is the purpose of that?
The purpose of it would be to deny our physical self something and ideally replace that with a spiritual dependency. And so as Jesus was fasting for 40 days in the desert, the idea there is he is denying himself food and he's focusing on God, and he's allowing God to be his nourishment. And this is one of those things that, like, I think once upon a time, I believe that was something you sort of said. It was kind of this metaphorical of, I am allowing God to sustain me by not eating food. But
really, it's the Cheetos I'm sneaking at lunch.
I'm believing more and more that there's a food that we know not of in terms of coming into fasting and God really sustaining our physical being by being in his presence. But ultimately, we deny ourselves a physical, there's nothing wrong with eating. There's nothing evil about eating. The human body is designed to run on, eating throughout the day, whether that be 3 meals or 2 meals or 7 meals, whatever it is that you're used to.
Don't pick on the Italians, Dave.
Yeah. But again, just it's denying ourselves something physical to focus on the spiritual, and God meeting us in that kind of an outward sign of being able to say, I'm going to give this up for you.
Well, and Jesus even alludes, you mentioned that food that we don't know of, and Jesus in John 6 calls himself the bread of life.
Yeah. And
he's not being sarcastic or clever when he says, like, no, really,
right,
I am the bread. Like, I have the ability to sustain you beyond what physical food can. And then isn't there a time when he goes to the woman at the well and he tells her, like, I have the water of everlasting life, or
Yeah, if
that
you
you
drink,
don't know about. Yeah,
if you drink the water that I gave you, you would never be thirsty again. And she's like,
exactly.
oh, Lord, give that to me now.
Yeah.
And so,
Go tell your husband, I don't have one. Oh, you've spoken wisely.
so yeah. And like I said, I at one time I used to think, oh, that's kind of a cute little metaphor, clever little thing. But, and I'm not near in the habit of fasting like I was when I worked at the church. But I do believe that God can fill you in a way that you're like, oh, I didn't expect that. There's a supernatural filling that goes on there that is truly Him showing up. And then sometimes you're just hungry. Yeah. Sometimes you're like, gosh, all I want to do is eat. And it's really hard to focus on God because you're like, I can't wait till this fast is over and I can finally eat whatever I want and pig out. And
So, okay, so that's what fasting is. That's why we would do it in like the abstract. But what are some reasons people might consider fasting as the appropriate thing to do?
um, if you are trying to overcome an addiction or a sin, I believe fasting can be a useful tool in that. Um, um, breaking uh, breaking a bond that maybe an addiction has over you. Fasting can be a spiritual discipline in conjunction with prayer and meditation and things like that that can help you overcome addiction.
I find that interesting because I feel like a lack of food would make you weaker.
And I'm not
Would
saying this is like, hey, fast for 24 hours
and you're
it's
never
and
gonna,
it's
yeah.
but I think there's I just think there's a lot of things that go on with that. I think there's something physical that's going on with that. I think there's a demonstrating to God, I'm willing to do more. I want a physical expression of my commitment and my request of you to help me break this um, bond that sin has over my life. Um, and then I think fasting can be good and is useful for an answer for prayer. If you have a very specific sort of, um, God, I'm wondering if I should do X or I should do Y, or, you know, what is it that you're, I think you can get some clarity by using fasting as a part of your prayer time. And so fasting can be I choose to fast over lunch. If I'm going to eat breakfast, I'm going to eat dinner, but I'm going to take my lunch break that I would normally go eat. And I'm going to spend an hour praying. And obviously that fasting would be from the time between you have breakfast and you have dinner. But the time when I'd normally be putting the food in my body, I'm going to go to the Word and ask God to fill me through His Word. I think the first time you do a fast, you should do it something like that. Another option would be to, eat breakfast, lunch, choose not to eat dinner, and then breakfast the next morning, and then finish it with eating lunch the next day. I would not encourage somebody to try to just do the first time they fast to just do a 24 hours or 3 day or a 40 day. I think it
Yes.
is. I think it is a spiritual exercise, and I think you kind of build your spiritual muscles by skipping one meal and then skipping 2 meals, and then I guess ultimately when you get to the point of skipping 3 meals, that's where you're at a 24-hour doing that. And then the other thing can be, um, I'm going to fast from my normal gluttonous large meals that I eat, and you may do things like um, I'm going to eat fruit. I'm going to drink fruit juice, or those sorts of things to kind of be like, um, I'm going to sustain myself with a little bit of something, but I'm not going to go for that sort of um,
Meat and potatoes type of meal.
meat and potatoes. Where for us, it's like if I'm not uncomfortable, then I can't. I haven't eaten so much that I need to loosen the button on my pants. I haven't really eaten a proper meal, sort of thing. So, yeah, I think there's definitely different. It's something you want to ease into and then build that spiritual discipline and go for longer times. And certainly a 3 day fast can have some serious spiritual implications for folks. And then I've never even come close to trying it, but I'm not saying that somebody might not feel like God is asking them to do a 40-day fast. If you were to do something like that, might want to consult your doctor. You might want to get some input from somebody that knows what's going to go on with your body as you do that, so that you do it properly.
Yeah, that's...
Like I said, I've never done it. I haven't never felt God asking me to do it now.
Yeah, have
Maybe
you
he
guys
will.
noticed how Dave's talked this whole time about fasting and I've not said a peep? I wonder why that is. I always try and like do something for Lent just because. And I think the longest I've made it is like 8 days. And then I'm like at lunch drinking a pop. Look, what'd you give for Lent? Pop. Oh, come on. Like I just totally forget. You know? So anyways, that's obviously different than what a fast is.
Yeah.
Similar in I think desire or concept, but different in execution. All right, so that is I think a very well done description of what fasting is, why we would do it, and how we might do it. So thank you for that, Dave.
And I will just say that, and I know we've talked about this in episode 17, but Richard Foster's is that right? Celebration of
Yep.
So we'll put
Celebration
that
of the Disciplines.
Celebration of the Disciplines. We'll put that on the show notes too, because that's a good book
for all sorts of
all
stuff.
sorts of spiritual
prayer
disciplines.
and study and solitude and fasting and all that stuff. Yeah, it's a
and there's
very good book.
Disciplines of omission, is that right? And then like where you like fasting is a discipline of omission.
You're right. Solitude. And then there's stuff that you do.
Stuff that you do.
Kind of like sins.
Yeah.
But the good side. All right. So why is it important? We're gonna focus on the passage at hand here now. Why is it important to note that the Pharisees and John's disciples are fasting, but Jesus's disciples do not? Because that's the whole instigation of this passage. They come to him and they're like, "What's going on? Mm-hmm. How come we're doing this and your guys aren't?"
Yeah. I had never really noticed the John's disciples.
I caught that the second time I read it. The first time I glanced, I was like, "Oh, Pharisees, them. Yeah. We don't like them." Yeah. But the second time I caught John's disciples,
and I hadn't ever really spent much time on that, and I don't know that I really have any insight in this. So if you have something, I'll defer to you in terms of if there's something that you're looking at.
Well, no, my initial thought is that, the Pharisees obviously think that they know how things should be done. That's clear. So I think it's obvious they're like, we're fasting. Why are you not fasting? Like, we're doing it right. Why are you not doing it? Which is the easy thing here. But you throw in John's disciples, and John's the one that said, I'm just making the way for the guy whose sandals I'm not even fit to tie.
Right.
And he, when Jesus comes to get baptized, John says, you should be the one baptizing me, not the other way around. And so John, at least based on the story and the history we have, gets that Jesus is the guy. So it's interesting to me that his disciples are fasting and want to know why Jesus's aren't. So even somebody who gets it better than probably everybody else on the planet, who Jesus really is, still doesn't quite understand who Jesus is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's important to note that both his disciples and the Pharisees are confused about why Jesus's disciples are not fasting. I totally lost my train of thought just trying to pronounce that tongue twister there at the end. Let me start over. I think it is important to note those things about who's fasting and who isn't, because it shows that even John didn't fully comprehend who Jesus was at that time.
Yeah.
Because even later, it was previous to this, wasn't it? Where he sent his disciples be like, are you really the guy? And Jesus is like, the blind are healed, the sick are cured, sins that yada, like he rattles off a list. And so I think it's important for us to try and nowadays be what's what I'm looking for? Be humble enough and be hungry enough to try and seek what's really going on, not just to look at what church leaders are doing and church leaders are saying and follow their lead without coming back to Jesus. And that seems like a really weird application, and maybe I'm wrong here, but the disciples were doing what Jesus called them to do, and they were with Jesus. And these other religious leaders were doing what they thought was correct, but they were totally missing the reality that was in front of them. They were doing things the way that used to be done.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus says, where is it in verse 15? Can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? No, because you're at the wedding reception and you're having fun, right? And so it's almost like Jesus has this little private party going on that these other people are busy mourning, like, oh, the Messiah hasn't come. We need to fast to be closer to God. And Jesus is like, why are you? I'm right here. Fast later when I'm gone. You've got a direct connection to me right now physically. You can shake my hand. You can kiss my cheek. I can wash your feet. Save the fasting for when you don't have that connection. So it just reminded me that even religious leaders that are getting it wrong, like the Pharisees, and the religious leaders that are literally leading the way for Jesus, like in John, can still not quite fully comprehend what God is doing in their presence.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's just a reminder that Jesus is gone now physically. And so that fasting might be a way for us to get through the cloud of what people are saying, what denominations are doing, what famous church leaders are saying and saying we should do, and the whole politics and religion thing. Just get through all of that crap to find Jesus. Did that make any sense?
Yeah.
Okay. That was improv.
Yeah, and I think he chooses the wedding, like you said, the wedding guest, which Jesus is the bridegroom who we're talking about here, in case you hadn't picked up on that. And the wedding guest would be his disciples at that particular time. And I'm not going to pretend to understand everything that goes on at a Jewish wedding. But I think you're correct in that the idea is not just him being with them, but what is that atmosphere when a wedding is going on? And it's not just about, it's not just about being somber and serious. It's
a celebration.
It's a celebration, and it's having a good time. So, yeah, I think that's good.
All right, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Can you,
sure,
a wise one, Master Jedi?
No. No.
I'm picturing you with a ponytail and a lightsaber, and it's epic. I wish I had Photoshop. Anyways, can you explain the two metaphors that are in verses 16 and 17?
I can say what I've kind of arrived at with those, in that I think this is the one metaphor being an unshrunk cloth on an old garment, and then old wine in new wineskins.
New wine and old wineskins.
Thank you. Because, I guess old wine and new wineskin, you'd be good to go. It wouldn't burst.
But what's old wine? Who wants to drink old wine?
Isn't old wine better than new wine?
If it's sealed in,
Wineskins.
yeah.
um, to me, this is kind of like he's basically saying this is a game changer. Your old way of thinking is no longer valid here, and you need to get on board with the fact that things have changed, and that there are new wineskins. That the old way of doing things is no longer valid, and you need to think about the new way of doing things. And I think simply the new way of doing things in this particular is that the bridegroom is Jesus. Jesus is God, the Messiah, and he is present with them. The kingdom of heaven is there with them. They really need to live as though the kingdom of heaven is present with them and new, and not be so focused on the old way of doing things. And there's nothing wrong with, this is one of those times where he doesn't make a comment of, oh, you have little faith, or, any of that kind of thing. He kind of gives them this, okay, so we've got the wedding guest here. This is a time of celebration, and the old way of doing things doesn't apply at this point. It's the new way of doing things. And I honestly think that there continues to be new ways of doing things. And I don't think that should ever just be a just for the triviality or the novelty of doing something new that nobody's ever done before. But I do think there are times where God may reveal to somebody or a group of people a sort of, this is the new way of thinking, this is the new way of doing things. And ultimately, what I guess I mean by that is that cultures change, people change. And while God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, I do believe that God very much meets us where we are. And I don't want to come across as like there's new revelations of the Bible or anything like that. But I do think we can get a little too caught up in, well, this is the way we've always done things, and this is the way it should always be.
Which is a terrible reason to do anything.
Exactly.
This is how we've always done it.
So,
pet peeve.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that your response there totally changed how I read this passage.
I hate it when you say that, because then I'm like, oh crud, what did I?
No, it just means that you're wiser than I am, which is I'm okay with, Dave.
Yeah, but I'm not so sure that's always the case.
You don't.
Sometimes it might be. I'll say maybe every now and then.
Thank you, gosh. No, because when I read that, I was like, well, yeah, it makes sense. You don't put unshrunk cloth on old garments because it is going to rip. I don't own a wineskin, so I'm just going to take his word on it for this one. But when you said that this is a game changer and he is the new way of doing things, I was just like, well, that makes so much sense. Why is he going to attach himself to the old way of doing things?
Right.
He's going to start fresh, which is what he's been doing this entire book so far, since we started at the temptation that we mentioned earlier in the fast, and then the Sermon on the Mount. You've heard it said this, but I say to you this.
Right.
He's changing how things are done and are perceived, and how people understand their place in the kingdom of God. And so reading it that way, I was just like, oh, well, duh. They're not doing it the old-fashioned way. They're not because they don't need to right now, because he's there. And so anyways, I honestly am like looking at this. I'm like, how did I used to read that? Because Dave's way makes so much more sense. I think I was just kind of like, yeah, I get it. You got to shrink the cloth first. And Jesus is like, I ain't going to be shrunk, I'm sure that's exactly how he sounded too. But yeah, I just think it's interesting that Jesus, like you said, doesn't take the, oh, you little faith, or you whitewashed tombs, or you brood of vipers. He's just kind of like, this is how it's going to be from now on. And I can't imagine the Pharisees appreciated that, because they were very much built upon the old way of doing things. And he was constantly cutting them off at the pass.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wish I could have been there, because it would have been imagine someone doing that today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I think so.
Like someone, a pastor coming up in America who's just consistently cutting off tradition and long held sacred cows at the pass, but doing so biblically,
Mm-hmm.
not doing so unbiblically like so many have tried to do.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how that would go down. And I'm sure there are people that are trying, but it just would be interesting to see.
Maybe opening a can of worms here a little bit, but is it Pope Francis? Is that our current? I think he's doing that a little bit. I think he is
stirring the pot.
No, he can do that because he doesn't have to answer to, there's
he has to answer to God.
He has to answer to God.
And
but if he feels like
that will kill him if he does stuff.
But I think he's done that a little bit with the church in terms of, challenging people to, obviously homosexuality has been an issue that he's addressed. The global warming is something that he has addressed that has traditionally been.
Well, and he's even addressed the sexual abuse that's gone on in the Catholic Church. Like, people before him were just kind of like not talking about it, and he's like, "Oh no." As far as I'm aware, he's come out and said that we will handle this, and it will be, dealt with.
Mm-hmm. So yeah,
everyone seems to like him.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that people like him is I think he spends time with God. I know that sounds like a probably insane thing to say, but nothing against previous popes because I haven't paid a lot of attention to. I like Pope John Paul. He came to Des Moines
2 popes ago, right?
At least 2 popes ago. Yeah, 2 popes ago.
Because the one in the middle is the one that abdicated his spot.
Yeah,
which was. We can abdicate your marriage, but you can't abdicate the Pope.
Right.
No, that's not abdicating. That's
what I'm.
It's not divorce. It's. Oh my gosh.
Annul.
There we go. It's been annulled. It never happened. Anyways.
So yeah, I do think that even in the 21st century, we can get caught up in this is how we've always done things, and that's the way it should be. And when we say that's how we've always done things, we mean, well, that's how we've done it for the last 40 years. That's what we've done it for the last 50 years, maybe 100 years or something like that. When no, that's a relatively new even in of itself, but you think that's what you've known, so that's what you do. And anyway, that's kind of getting on a tangent, but I think that both collectively as the body of Christ and as individual believers, we need to be receptive to him revealing to us things that may be different than what we've always believed or what we've always done. And again, not for the novelty of it, not to just, I think that's one of the problems with academia is anytime you want to write a paper, you got to have this new idea that nobody's ever thought of. And so you get these wild, crazy.
There's only so many chords you can play, Dave.
Exactly. And so, but in a sense, we serve an infinite God. And so I do believe that there are things that he can show us that, hey, it's a little bit different than the way it used to be. And I think it's in the vein of, if I'm going to be a missionary to a different culture, we all readily accept that, okay, there's things that I might have to do differently to go minister to somebody that has lived differently than I have lived. But the reality is America's different than it was 60 years ago. And so think of yourself as, okay, I'm a 1960 Christian coming to 2015 Christian. I'm guessing there's some things that you would have to change about how you did things to be an effective missionary to a 21st century Christian, in the same way that you would accept changes to go be a mission to somebody that lives in the Congo. And I think as Christians, we have a hard time accepting that and dealing with change and saying that even though we serve a God that's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, the world that we minister in is a little bit different, and we may have to change a little bit. So,
agreed. Yes, God may be the same, but the world is not.
Nope.
All right. Well, any closing thoughts, David?
Do I have any closing thoughts? I know the last time we visited fasting, I was like, I really need to do this again. And 14 episodes later, I haven't really fasted. So I don't know, make a commitment to getting back to doing that practice.
I don't think I ever have.
Really?
Yeah.
I think it's good. So
you think it's good that I've never fasted?
No, I think it's good to fast.
All right, duly noted. Well, I think that brings us to the end of episode 31, Dave.
And again, it has gone by very quickly, so
it was fun though.
It was fun.
Sitting here in your basement, shooting the breeze, talking about the Bible.
Yes.
All right. Well, until next time.
Until next time.
Arrivederci.
Bye.